Do I need to start over? No, it's okay. We're going to read through it again. So my apologies for not starting the recording, but we'll backtrack. When the world knows beauty as beauty, ugliness arises. When it knows good as good, evil arises. Thus, being and non-being produce each other. Difficult and easy bring about each other. Long and short reveal each other. High and low support each other. Music and voice harmonize each other. Front and back follow each other. Therefore, the sages manage the work of detached actions, conduct the teaching of no words. They work with myriad things, but do not control. They create, but do not possess. They act, but do not presume. They succeed, but do not dwell on success. It is because they do not dwell on success that it never goes away. This is number 3. Do not glorify the achievers, so the people will not squabble. Do not treasure goods that are hard to obtain, so the people will not become thieves. Do not show the desired things, so their hearts will not be confused. Thus, the governance of the sage empties their hearts, fills their bellies, weakens their ambitions, strengthens their bones. Let the people have no cunning and no greed, so those who scheme will not dare to meddle. Act without contrivance, and nothing will be beyond control. All right, last one. The Tao is empty. When utilized, it is not filled up. So deep, it seems to be the source of all things. It blunts the sharpness, unravels the knots, dims the glare, mixes the dust. So indistinct, it seems to exist. I do not know whose offspring it is. Its image is the predecessor of the emperor. Okay, so we're only looking at 4 texts today, but and forgive my other notations. I forgot to pull out my additional notes from previous studies. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the origin of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of myriad things. Thus, constantly without desire, one observes its essence. Constantly with desire, one observes its manifestations. These two emerge together, but differ in name. The unity is said to be the mystery of mysteries, the door to all wonders. The first line of the Tao Te Ching can be one of the most confusing. Some have interpreted it to mean that we must never speak of the Tao, or that if we try to explain it, then we must have no true understanding of it. What it actually means is that that we can never understand the Tao through the intellect alone. We must feel it. Talking about it can be useful, but will never replace the actual experience of living it. So I want to hear what everybody's take is on this very first paragraph here, and what you think about this notation here at the bottom about it being, being something that you have to experience to understand. What kind of images does this conjure up in your mind?
Okay, so have you ever had one of those moments where everything just feels like perfect timing, like the stars align and it's just everything's going right?
Yeah.
I feel like that sums it up to me, like that moment, that feeling, like it said to feel it.
Okay. So what would you quantify that feeling as? Would you say that it's like euphoric?
It would definitely feel that way. Yeah.
I get that. I felt like there were a lot of serendipitous things that happened today, like parking spots opening up at just the right time, and I was like, "Oh yay!" Is that the Tao? I
I
think,
think so.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think even when you're communicating with others, and you know how we say we're on the same wavelength sometimes, like that, it just feels, it flows, and you're both on the same page for, you know, how we say these certain things. And I think that's what we're trying to explain in our own words.
But
That
can
makes
you explain it?
sense. You can explain it though, because it's not the name that can, the name that can be named is not the eternal name. So it, that to me says that we do our best to put words to it, but there are no words that can be put to it.
I understand feelings like that. That feeling of perfect love is, I think, one of those. Like there's just no possible way to describe it. A sunset, there's just no possible way to describe the glory of that. And
Right. I
yet
mean, when
you can soak it in, right?
yeah, but you can't fully describe its gloriousness. It's all, you know?
Even in a photograph, I don't think, I mean, there are some beautiful photographs of the world, but uh, I don't know the difference between what my eyes can see and what people photograph. Just can't compare.
Right.
So the name is the mother of myriad things. What do you think that means?
I have no idea.
No. Well,
John, Billy, what do you guys think it means?
I mean, I'm kind of get, I'm kind of getting the feeling this whole section is kind of a reference to dualistic thinking, to think that there's a beginning and an end, and this kind of notion that we see things as opposites when in fact they're in fact the same thing, just from maybe different perspectives, or they're you know, from different extremes of the same thing. So it feels to me that, for instance, when it mentions the Tao can be, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. I kind of I don't know how much how much this actually works in this particular text, but it feels to me that as soon as you identify what they're speaking about here, you're fixating on one element of it, and there's always, because there's a reference here of there being something and being nothing, and so to identify something is to ignore the nothing, and vice versa. That's why it can't be fully named, because you're only identifying half of it by giving it an identity. Um, and it's very, I mean, it's really profound. I think that the name is the mother of a myriad of things. So that would tie in nicely with that concept then, that when we're naming something, we're identifying many things, but we're not actually understanding the nature of this kind of something and nothingness, if you like. It's a bit like binary code, I guess, zeros and ones. I mean, binary code can create such an elaborate code and manifest incredible computer programs and that sort of thing. But ultimately, binary code is zeros and ones, nothings and somethings. And this kind of feels similar to that, you know, it's saying if you identify something, you can only identify that something and not the other element of that, which is the nothingness. So it's, I mean, it's really mind bending, but it feels to me like it's leaning towards that kind of dualistic or that the shortcomings of dualistic thinking, the something and the nothing.
So is all
That
existence something and nothing? Or is it something else entirely?
Well, yeah, quite well, because that's what it's saying at the end, isn't it? It's saying the unity of both of those things is the door to all wonders. The mystery of mystery, the door to all wonders. So that's I mean, because when I studied some Buddhism and Zen Buddhism in particular, and there was a lot of reference to the kind of problem. One of the major problems of human thinking was to think dualistically. I mean, when we talk about the origins of the universe,
Yeah.
very few people consider that there isn't an origin of the universe. It's always been here, eternal. So yeah, no,
Yeah, that's mind bending to
that
me.
is, I mean, it really is.
Oh,
And I
goodness.
think this is maybe what that leans towards.
Well, but I guess that kind of makes sense if the universe came out of one thing, one being, if you can call it that, then I guess that would make sense.
Yeah, well,
It
quite, yeah.
always existed. It just is ever expanding. That is a talk for another day, I think. Jess, what are your thoughts?
I am blown away. I really like the way that John, right? John explained that, or how he put that into words. I was able to grasp it. And even by saying what I said, I was already going towards one way. Like I had already identified with something. So when you asked me, is that the Tao? And I said yes, I was, for me, looking at it, I wasn't then, because I was already gearing just towards the euphoric feeling one way. Does that make any sense at all?
Mhm. So, Katie, if you are able, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. I see your comment, when words fail, music speaks. I do agree that we are all vibration and frequency. We're just kind of dense. I get it. No worries. But chime in as you are able. Um, so are we then part of the Tao?
Well, I guess so. I guess we are. I mean, I'm assuming that the Tao is like the truth or the truth of all things. I mean, that's what it feels to me. It's like, it's the kind of the ultimate understanding. But as you say, it goes beyond the intellect. It's something which has to be experienced. I
Does
mean,
it fall under objective or subjective truth?
are they the same thing? Yeah, of course.
Or is it both? Both and that.
But of course, this is all the same thing. I think and it's really difficult to comprehend. I think because we're so wired to think in exactly the opposite way to this. We make choices. Something is good, something is bad, something's right, something's wrong. And what have you. And then to then all of a sudden to try and rewire your thinking, to not think dualistically, it's so difficult. And that's probably the initial hurdle of this kind of Eastern philosophy and belief. It is really.
But you know what has helped, at least for me, the idea that there is good in the bad and bad in the good. Because I've always talked about dualistic thinking like two ends of the same spectrum, just like the electromagnetic spectrum. One is ultra amazing light, and one is really low dense sound, and these encompass the same range of things, but they're all different and unique in their own way. No two are alike, but they still belong on the same spectrum, So I feel kind of like all of humanity, nature, the universe, everything is all kind of part of that network.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about, all being kind of interconnected, to one another through a network.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so this is going to be so hard. I'm sorry, guys. I have a problem when I try to explain things. It just doesn't seem to come out right. I know what I want to say, but the words just don't want to add up. But I think John said earlier, like with thinking, that's where we start to go wrong, is just by thinking, because of the wiring and the pre-programming of the brain.
Okay.
Um,
So non-action would be the action to take then.
right. And then he also mentioned perspective. It's all about perspective. You know, if you our eyes deceive us so much, and then that's where we come up with these terms of what is beautiful, what is not beautiful.
That's
Um,
interesting the way you said that. Our eyes deceive us. Were we having a conversation earlier about the deceiver?
Yeah, sure.
Very interesting. Would you say that your ability to gauge the energy of a room fails you ever?
I didn't catch the last part. The ability to gauge.
To gauge the energy of a room. When you walk into a room, you can kind of like, whoa, okay, something happened in here, or oh, it feels good in here today. You know what I mean? Has your intuition ever failed you?
So I feel like intuition has not failed me, but my brain has, when I allow the anxiety and the
Second
programming of
guess
the
yourself?
brain.
Yeah.
Right, when that creeps in and starts to tell me what others are thinking and what others are looking at, you know, dis- that's deceitful. To I'm deceiving myself, you know, and then I can read the energy wrong because I'm no longer in the Tao. Does that make sense?
I get it.
Yeah, that's really, just to add to that. I mean, I think that's a really good and interesting observation, because you know when reading about Buddhism, they say sometimes you will have these small windows of just seeing things. I mean, the kind of push, I guess, is to see things truly as they are, without judgment, without thinking them one thing or another. You just see
Right.
this thing, and that ability. And I wonder if intuition is actually that element. You're tapping into that truth, that raw truth, that split second, and then
So.
and then all of a second, your thoughts and your ideas and beliefs and stuff all start kicking in and convoluting that initial
Right.
initial
Yeah.
view.
Well, one of the things that was very interesting for me, and everyone is different, so I can't say that everyone has the same type of intuition. Some people say they have a gut feeling. Some people, it's a very quick, like, flash of information. I'm one of those people. It's called having a splenic authority. My spleen is what governs that reaction. And it's just this real quick, I need to do this.
Yeah.
Or I need to not do this.
Yeah.
And if I don't catch it and I don't follow through with it, I regret it every time. And I always know when I have that kind of like, oh, I need to do this. And it ends up kind of whacking me in the face because I was the salmon swimming upstream. You know, Alan Watts, he was talking earlier about the Tao being something that you flow with. And that again just kind of reignites that idea of something on the electromagnetic spectrum. And if we are just densified light, if we've just become matter from energy, is it possible to go the opposite direction, or would that be swimming upstream?
I want to believe that it is so possible to go the opposite direction. I feel like that's
think you're a
what,
good testament to that, Joss. I do.
yeah,
I do. Yeah.
I love you.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? By the way, my apologies, Katie and Felicia. I certainly did not intend to leave you out. And I really don't know if my notes are even finished. This has been kind of a crazy week. Okay, yes, they are mostly. Anyway, hello, welcome. Okay, yeah, divine timing, exactly. You know how I feel about that too. It is what it is. Come in when you can. I'm glad to have you. Okay, so number 2, This is another footnote about this first verse here. So not only is the Tao beyond the power of spoken words to describe, but it is also beyond the power of written words to define. That which can be defined is limited by the definition, and the Tao transcends all limitations. So that sounds very much like what you just said, right? Before the universe came into being, concepts and things did not exist, and no human consciousness was present to perceive and name them. Therefore, the Tao that initiated creation was the ultimate nameless enigma. Okay, I can see that. I always see it kind of as this inky black void, though, just because I feel like there's there's unlimited potential in nothing. It's blank canvas. You can put whatever you want on it, right? So I don't see the nothingness or the abyss or the the face of the deep that Christ or that God's Spirit hovered over. I don't see how that would be something necessarily bad, even though we tend to think of kind of like the never-ending story, that blackness, the darkness that comes and creeps over the land. I don't think it's like that. I think it's limitless possibility. Yeah, well, and that's what I was thinking too, Katie, about Adam being the one to name everything. Funny that you bring up atom. We were reading that little excerpt about light in the subtle body encyclopedia, and we were talking about atoms and photons and all sorts of stuff. Once the universe came into being, the stage was set for the physical manifestation of everything, including human beings. These humans eventually attained sufficient awareness to observe all things and name them. So this kind of goes back to that idea of, the double slit experiment. Does something really exist if no one observes it? So what came first then, the chicken or the egg? Did all of creation come first, but no one was there to observe it, so it didn't exist? Or did mankind come first and then all of creation had to come next? Who observed what?
There's a quote, I can't remember who said that. There's a quote, there is no good or bad, only faults that make it so. I can't remember who said it though. I don't want to cheat and Google it.
I feel like Alan Watts just mentioned that today. I was listening to him. Very fascinating stuff. I love this book so very much. Okay, a couple more notes before we move on. Again, pardon my extra notations, it makes it easier for me to do the notes. Self-serving desires tend to limit us to a superficial level. Agreed. If we think of other people and not just focus on ourselves, we will find it much easier to connect with the underlying reality. This applies to every aspect of life. It is one of the most powerful teachings of the Tao. I love this, and I could not agree more. What are you guys' thoughts on this?
Yes, I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, this is not limited to sort of Eastern philosophies either, is it? This kind of passage is right through most religious beliefs. I mean, I think it's 100% true. The more you obsess about the material and stuff, that's self-serving, as it says here. And the danger of that is when you're self-serving, you then also become obsessed with self-preservation, which is it's fatalistic. It doesn't exist. You will transcend whether you wish to or not. And I think when you become selfless, you let go of that anchor which ties you down so heavily to these things. And you become selfless. I mean, I always held that belief with in terms of transcending to the afterlife, that there's almost evidence of that when you become absolutely selfless, which is what being a good person you aspire to, don't you? So you imagine when you're completely selfless, you would die for somebody, or you would give everything you have to help somebody else. You've literally transcended. Then I believe you are beyond. You are virtually beyond. You are right on the edge of transcending, and I think that's why we're encouraged to do so when we practice spirituality or your religion. You know, there's a reason for that. It's not just to adhere to a moral code. That's part of the transitioning process. So you know, I think it's just it's absolutely
Would you consider that a virtue?
a virtue. Well, I guess so. I mean, it's probably the end product of all virtue, is it not? That you know, you almost become numb to yourself, not in a negative way, but it's you know you're
Well, the reason I ask is because that second word, Dao De Jing, Da is virtue.
Mhm.
So, you know, it brings up the idea of virtuous living. But if you're not supposed to be looking at things in a dualistic way, then what is the point of doing something virtuous?
Well, I
It
guess.
doesn't matter one way or another. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess because I guess because ultimately, if you were to break down good and bad and regress good and bad or good and evil, if you like, I mean, how far can you regress that? I guess ultimately we'd want to adhere to creation and creation, which leads to more creation and positive creation and that kind of flow of life. And I mean, that extends to when we have kids and stuff, right? And we pass on our genes and our DNA to our children. So everything kind of leans towards this kind of positive creation. And there are, you could say, well, other things are created which aren't good. But then that's kind of going against the flow of this kind of this initial kind of force, which is pushing matter out into the universe and life out into the universe. So I guess when you break it down, you think, well, you can't call something good and you can't call something bad because they're both the same thing. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to subscribe to both of them. I think the reason we have to drive towards good and good action as we perceive it is because there is an imbalance. I mean, losing somebody is bad, but it's not necessarily always unjustified or evil. It could be from natural causes. So when that's not the case, that's when we have to navigate away from that and towards this kind of.
So you think if you can do good, you should do good?
I think so. Yeah, no, I think so. I think you're you know, when you're doing good, you're facilitating other people to achieve that kind of selfless state as well. I think. I mean, it's
Okay, so I have a hypothetical for you because I want to try to look at this from all angles. If you, what if it were to take a life in order to save another? Is that doing good,
to take a life.
or is that a moral gray area?
Well, to take a life.
Bad.
Well, I guess the problem is there'd always be you're always going to be faced with that kind of problem on some sort of scale, and you're not necessarily get it right. But what you could do after making a bad decision is we learn. This is what we do. We learn from it. And some of us spend the first half of our life in absolute chaos, hurting people and making mistakes. So it's probably impossible for us to take the right path all the time, but we can always.
But what if it's
navigate.
not the wrong path?
Well, I guess
It's already something.
yeah, no, yeah, well, exactly, yeah, yes. But it's tricky because there's that kind of question. I know they do that sort of question in some of the social sciences, you know,
You have to.
Yeah, of
You
course.
have to kind of play around with it. I agree, Katie, that we do need to be the change that we want to see and that we do need to be doing good in the
Sure.
world if we are able to do good. But I am curious what that moral gray area is.
Sure.
Is it, at what point is it no longer doing good? At what point are we enabling the homeless person on the street? You know, at what point
Of
are we
course.
being too um, needy in a relationship or overbearing for our children, or you know, things like that? And it's not done out of malicious intent. It's done with heart and the best of intentions, but it could still be bad. So
Yeah.
there's good in the bad, and there's bad in the good again, right?
Well, I think there's always going to be that no matter what, and that's where the balance comes in.
Mhm.
Like even if Billy perceives it as bad, Jessica doesn't perceive it as bad. So it's about perspective at that specific moment of whatever's going on within our world. I think this is why we as humans, we tend to say we have to get out of our own way
Yeah.
because it's ourselves holding us back from
Thinking.
truly ascending. You know, once you start thinking about where that point is, we lost it because that point does not exist.
Mhm.
Or
It's
it does
always
exist, it's
thinking.
just different for everyone.
Yeah.
So you're never going to be able to pinpoint that point.
Mm.
So does that make sense?
I think I wouldn't say never. I think that if you have an opportunity to get quiet with yourself and honest with yourself, you could pinpoint that.
Right, for you,
That
your inner truth for yourself,
before you figure
100%.
it
And
out.
that's where the silence comes in the nothingness. That's where knowledge is, in the void.
Mhm. Agreed, Katie. The discernment is really important from moment to moment, and that doesn't necessarily mean that in that particular moment you can't then go against your moral convictions, right? Because we all have moral convictions. We all have boundaries that we say generally we would not cross unless you know, in that instance, okay, well, we're willing to do something that we wouldn't normally do because it would be for the greater good, you know.
Sure.
Do you want to shoot the masked gunman? Probably. You know.
And the masked gunman could be the person who pulls the guy who finds a cure for cancer out of a burning car one day. So
That's true. Exactly. It's kind of this never ending
yeah, quite.
It's the yang to the yin or whatever. I find it really interesting, and this is so probably off topic, but this thing we call money, which is essentially paper from trees, like we have flipped it upside down. Like that is the opposite that controls us. You know what I mean? It blows my mind that that is what we allow to control our thoughts a lot of times and our actions.
We allow a lot of external to control the, I would say, the direction of our thoughts. Because you can either go a positive or a negative, right? It's up to you which way you decide to take it. Which wolf do we feed? Exactly, Katie. Exactly. Um, do your best to feed the one that's good, but at the same time, if you leave the bad side starving, it's going to be real hungry. Right? I mean, I feel like we need to explore this. What about our own dark sides? Are we just supposed to, oh, no, we can only do good. We can never explore the darkness. We can never dig to the gritty, grimy parts of ourselves. I think that's dangerous.
It 100% is. In recovery, they always say that when you're recovering from like alcoholism or whatnot, your disease is there in the background doing push-ups, like just waiting.
Oh yeah,
It's getting stronger.
I've seen that in energy work and in mediumship work. I've seen that darkness. Katie can tell you. I swear I saw what it kind of looked like a monkey on his back, but not a literal monkey. Um, and I had never even met her husband before, but I could see like just a dark energy kind of attached. And uh it's amazing that we as physical beings can often forget the spiritual aspect of things and how there are energies, entities, whatever you want to call them, within the realm around us that have the potential to affect us, to attach to us. That is all I see in Reiki. It's literally like a soup with a black spider web, sticky kind of consistency, and I can feel it. That's why you hear me doing that all the time, because those energies get trapped in your auric field, they get trapped in your chakras, and I can pull them out. So there's something within the Tao that has space for darkness. Is that a bad thing?
I don't have an explanation for this, but just like a feeling that it's needed. Like it's not a bad thing, but it's very much needed for the balance of things.
Well, I often hear, well, how would we know light without darkness? Makes sense. We wouldn't.
This is
Vice versa.
this is going back now to the value of nothing being a blank canvas, and from nothing something arises. And I guess it's the same with the darkness. There has to be darkness in order for there to be light. I think let's just then, I guess, to suggest that it's worth exploring the darkness, or what have you. And if we're gonna talk more specifically about more like objective moral, an objective moral law, and going against that is dancing with the darkness, if you like. I think most kind of beliefs warn us of the darkness and stuff, and the chaos it can bring. I mean, here we are now in a world which is perfectly formed for our existence, and the universe is formed from nothing. So the darkness has been here, and it's done what it's needed to do. And I mean, every kind of religion speaks of embracing the light, and what have you, and evil is around us without us having to entertain it. You know, we don't. It's not something that I think necessarily needs nurturing. I think it's there without it exists without us, or without us having to kind of nurture it, or tap into it. It's yeah, no, I just think it's I had a really good way of putting it. I've forgotten now, but yeah, no, I just think it's from my understanding, it's the kind of the thing of darkness. This I'll tell you what it was actually. It was Jordan Peterson said, and we talked about this earlier. Um, Somebody should be able to be a monster, but be in control of it. Because there are times where you have to be aggressive or threatening or dangerous. It's vital for your survival. So I guess in that respect, then you could call that the darkness. But then that's usually for a noble cause. If I'm hostile towards someone because somebody I love is in danger, or something like this. So I guess in that respect, then you could say you do have to embrace it. And we do all the time, all of us. We all lose our temper. We all have destructive thoughts towards other people when we're caught off guard, and what have you. And maybe it is justified. Maybe it is necessary. You know, I'm not sure.
So I guess then the question would be: is this something that we work to transmute, or do we allow it to just coexist and not pass any judgment on it? Our imperfections, our dark sides. Just let them be.
I think it's definitely worth considering. I kind of backtracked because when I started talking, I was very much of the feeling, you know, I don't like this notion of kind of
Tapping into the dark
tapping
side.
into the dark side. Didn't like it.
Then you just talk yourself out of
And then I just talked myself out of it. Maybe that's the dark side. It's got me. Are we gonna start playing the clip of me hanging upside down?
It's like the hanged man, but it's a good card.
Wait, Jessica, say that one more time.
I said it's like the hanged man, but it's a good card. Is that?
That's so weird.
It's used.
I swear I didn't say anything to her. I didn't
That's
tell
the
her anything about
strangest
that. You
thing.
heard what she said.
That's what I saw when you said that in my head. I saw the hanged man card not reversed.
Oh my goodness. You know what the hangman card looks like, right?
What's the hangman card? What does it look like?
Oh my goodness, Jessica, that is so great.
That's
You're
So
gonna freak out.
this is how this happens to me all the time.
Just
And
tap
it's
in.
happening a lot lately.
She's tapped in. Oh
It's
my.
really weird stuff that I get, like Jessica, you said earlier, you get glimpses.
Mhm.
I get, it
Oh.
sounds weird saying visions, but like I get these visions, like these pop-ups in my head.
So, okay, give me a second, guys. So that is the hanged man.
Yes. It's almost the same plastic bottles as well.
Well, would you like to tell them briefly?
Yes.
Tell them briefly, and then if
So-
they want to see, you're welcome to share.
So the reason this feels like an epiphany now is because when Jessica started going da 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 da, I think that's the music from Star Wars,
Yes.
and it's the I think it's called the Imperial March.
I believe so.
So when I came over to America, I've got lots of videos on my phone of me being a goofball. And one of them is I had a chin-up bar, and I've got a thing called gravity boots, which basically are hooks, which you tie around your ankle. And then if you've got a chin-up bar, you can clip your ankles onto the chin-up bar and then hang upside down. And this is good for your back. It stretches your back out. And I did this once whilst filming it to try and show off to my friends, and got stuck on the bar. And it took me about 20 minutes to get off the bar, and it was so funny, and I ended up falling down. And it was so funny that I made a video, a short clip of it, playing that Star Wars music. And as soon as Jessica said that, played that, you mentioned the hangman card.
That just blows my
That's
mind.
such a spooky.
That's hilarious. I'm over here laughing. I'm muted, but I'm laughing.
I think.
That's really
I think
strange.
he could win money on this. You know, America's Funniest Home Videos or something.
That's really great. That's really crazy.
It was great. If he wants to share at the end after we're done recording,
Oh,
I
yeah.
can tap you into it.
Oh,
I would love to see that.
Oh, I was in stitches. See, wait a minute. So I only saw a brief bit of that. So that was 20 minutes of you struggling to get off of there, John?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Oh my goodness.
That's dangerous as well. Like, I couldn't get my phone was over there filming it all, so I couldn't get to my phone to ring that. You can't hang upside down for too long either. It's dangerous.
So they are requesting for you to share it.
That
Like
is
I
awesome.
said,
So I
after
can-
we turn off the recording,
I'll
I
send
can
it.
have you tap
I can
into it or
s-
something.
So I can send it to your phone and you can play.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, that'd be great. Go ahead and send it a while,
Yes.
and then I'll be able to pull it up on my iPad.
That's funny.
If Felicia said she would have panicked. It was hilarious though, Felicia, because the reason it was so funny is because I've done dumb things like that before and had a camera filming and not been. Yeah, that was great. It was a good laugh.
Perhaps you should upload it on YouTube.
I told him he could win some money on that one. He really could.
That was really, really strange. That was strange.
I told you, but see,
Yeah.
that's what we're talking
Mhm.
about. This is that tapped in that we're talking about. I've known for years that Jess was an empath.
Mhm.
Known that. And she is on point with it.
Yes.
So yeah, it's wonderful. Great job, Jess. Okay.
I wish I could control it, but it just comes when it wants to.
Yeah, you can learn to have it happen on command, but
Can I ask, what does the hangman card represent?
well, it's basically Woden. It's Woden. He hung from the Yggdrasil tree or the Yggdrasil tree, and that's how he got the runes. And
Okay.
it was his opportunity for enlightenment.
So
It's kind of like sacrifice to attain enlightenment.
So Wodan as in Odin.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
I might have a Norse surname as well.
Yeah.
So I have a book in front of me and I looked up the hanged man meaning in this particular book.
Uh-huh.
And in this book, it has it as paused activity, which I find as hilarious with what you guys were talking about. And it says transition, meditation, and then this is funny. It says weighing options. That seems pretty funny regarding what was happening. And then it has,
You weren't going anywhere, and you were weighing your options.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially when one leg came out and the other stayed in.
and then it has deciding what changes to make. So it took you 20 minutes. And then it has self-sacrifices for gain. So I think it's interesting, and no judgment here, I promise. But I think it's kind of ironically funny how he said he posted it to kind of show off to friends. And then that's when things went wrong. You know?
Oh my goodness, it's something even more mind-bending.
What's that?
The book in my hand is the KO of Jeet Kune Do,
Oh, wow.
which is absolutely completely about this belief. Bruce Lee
That's
really
crazy.
embraced. That's crazy. It's in my hand as well. You can look at the title of the book. It is getting a bit weird now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
See, you're meant to be here right now.
Yeah.
This is how this group has worked for years, okay?
That's crazy. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. Okay, so the sixth footnote. So we're only on verse 1, guys. The sixth footnote is the two refer to manifestations, outer appearance, and essence, inner truth. They represent the material world and the spiritual realm, respectively. Both emerge from the Tao. Because the Tao encompasses all, not only spirituality, but also the physical universe. The basic unity of the two is the mystery that we investigate in Tao cultivation. So what we're doing here as we're reading through the Tao is cultivating the Tao. We're kind of like growing a garden, if you will. Okay, we are planting seeds for non-judgment. We are planting seeds for action and non-action. Working with our chi, absolutely, and that's what I mean. This is an opportunity to really tap into something energetically and emotionally and intellectually and even physically through this study. So I really hope you guys will pour into these words a little bit. Go back and read them again a couple times. I can't tell you how I've read that first verse, just the first verse. I think we're going to come out of this study different. Really do. Scoot it along slowly, John, because I see you're still reading. Good. So number 2, when the world knows beauty as beauty, ugliness arises. When it knows good as good, evil arises. Thus, being and non-being produce each other. Difficult and easy bring about each other. Long and short reveal each other. High and low support each other. Music and voice harmonize each other. Front and back follow each other. Therefore, the sages manage the work of detached actions, conduct the teaching of no words. They work with myriad things, but do not control. They create, but do not possess. They act, but do not presume. They succeed, but do not dwell on success. It is because they do not dwell on success that it never goes away. I love this, especially this part after the sages, because I think it's pretty easy to understand the first part. You know, we are talking about polar opposites being able to balance each other out, right? You can't really have one without the other. How do you have a short stick if you don't have a long one? You know, how do you know what high is if you've never been lower than the high, right? Now, this managing the work of detached actions, I think that's one of the first steps in this cultivation of our Tao garden, right? Being able to take action, necessary action, I would say responsible action. So some of you know that I use the word responsible in a slightly different way than most people. If you are able to give a response, then you are responsible. Whether you choose to give a response or not determines whether or not you are responsible. You know what I mean? So you are responsible always, whether or not you choose to utilize that. Sometimes non-action is still action, right? But so we can take action, but we need to be detached from the consequences for that action, for the results of that action, which brings an interesting question to mind. If we are not supposed to have any kind of emotion or judgment towards our own actions or the actions of others, I suppose, for that matter, then how would we determine what to even do? It goes back to that question before. At what point is it good or bad or utterly irrelevant? Do we know when an action is just for the sake of doing it? What's the point?
I guess that the danger of this kind of belief, and I've heard criticisms from Christian apologists about Taoism and other Eastern philosophies and beliefs, is that it's fatalistic, it's self-consuming. It's like that, and they criticize like the yin and yang as being two serpents consuming each other. So that a lot of the Christian theologists and apologetics I've read, that's the criticism they cast over this kind of Eastern belief, that it's fatalistic, it consumes itself, and there is no meaning, which is a bit difficult. Obviously, it's not humanistic. It's the criticism I cast when I was baptized, and when I transitioned from Buddhism to Christianity. One major critique I had of it was the fact that, especially because with Zen Buddhism, there's this kind of focus on not losing your imagination and your wonderment of things and seeing things as they truly are, and trying to distinguish your imagination and this kind of figurative way of thinking and just seeing things as they truly are. And for me, I found that non-human at the time. That was like, well, this is one of the greatest jewels in the human mind, this ability to manifest things, you know, be they true or not. But I think it's I've lost my thread again. It's
It's
I go off on such a tangent. I lose my thread.
Does anybody else have any thoughts?
What was the original question? Again, if you honest.
Well, at what point do we detach ourselves emotionally from an action?
That's what I was going to say. Again, what I said earlier, I do believe that we're supposed to navigate towards right action, or good as we perceive it. And I mean, you know, the law of our heart, as it's said in other books. So we do kind of know what we're supposed to be navigating towards. So it's there's the Buddhist fable of the two monks by the river, and there's a girl trying to cross the river, and the monks, part of their belief is they can't touch women, and one of the monks sees the girl struggling, so he picks her up and puts her on his shoulders, and they cross the river. And when they get across, he puts the girl back down, and they carry on walking for a moment, and the other monk turns around to him and says, "I can't believe you picked that girl up." To which that monk responds, "Are you still carrying her?" So you see, I think you know when it's time to act. You know what the good is, and not to dwell on whether or not it's breaking this rule or it's contradicting this belief. If it's right in that moment, then it's right in that moment. Any kind of reflection beyond that is kind of almost out of context of that moment in time. So I think maybe we kind of know what good is. I mean, I can remember studying Buddhism, and the initial Buddhism was called the originally I think it was called the lesser vessel. So it was focused on the self and the preparation of the self for enlightenment. And then further down the road, it became the greater vessel, and they were more focused on helping others and achieving enlightenment through kind action and stuff. So I mean,
It's interesting that you have to help yourself though before you can help others. It's almost like you got to put on your mask.
Of course. I mean, that's kind of fundamental psychiatry, isn't it? Straighten it straight, or make order of your own life before you try and change the world. Otherwise, you'll bring more chaos into the world.
Did anybody else have anything you'd like to add?
I'm trying to figure out how to put it into words. I mean, I agree with what you both are saying. And I was just looking on the internet to try to find the words to be able to put to it that as humans, when we take away all the ideas of what is good and bad and ugly and beautiful and what's going to benefit us and what's going to harm us, or all that kind of selfish behavior, we're good, like down to the core. When we're centered and just human, we do the right thing. If you take away everything, we would do the right thing. It's like if somebody was about to fall off a cliff in front of you hanging, you're not going to wait and see, what color skin they have before you reach for them. Does that make sense?
Well, most people, I wouldn't say that that's true for everyone. And I think that kind of goes into that idea that I mentioned earlier about people who didn't have souls.
Well, and I also think that those people that won't reach that split second, they let the predisposed programming of their life, like they've already ruined it by letting all that creep in and make the decision for them instead of just acting. Like the thinking, you don't think, you act kind of thing. The thinking is what messes it up. I don't know. I feel like I'm butchering this.
I think that's spot on.
Yeah. Well, and Katie mentioned the video. There was an interview with a woman from North Korea, and the guy was asking her if she thought that humans were inherently good. And she said, no, absolutely not. If that was the case, North Korea wouldn't exist. That brings up a really interesting point, because generally speaking, I would think that people are inherently good. I mean, the people that I've encountered overall, not that I've never encountered a bad person, but generally speaking, the majority of people that I've encountered, I would consider them good people. Are they perfect? No, but.
And there's something else to consider. Where do we set the bar for good action?
Sure.
I mean, seeing a human in a desperate situation and need rescue, and we rescue them, is that actually good action, or is that normal action? This kind of notion that the kindness and what have you is in some way an elevated sense of selflessness. Maybe it's not. Maybe this is how we're supposed to be. This is what I was tapping into earlier. We're by acting good, we're actually on that. We're on that flat line. Our perception of good is actually just normal behavior.
I
You
love
know.
that. I love that. So inherently, what you're saying is the baseline is
Yes,
goodness.
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. What he said.
Okay. I like that. See, I'm approaching this from a very open and minimally informed perspective in terms of this particular text.
Well, based on what we're sorry to jump in again, but based on what we're studying here, you might be in the most advantageous position then, because if you haven't spent a great deal of time studying and reflecting and that sort of time, you're coming into a subject relatively raw, which kind of requires you to be relatively raw and unopinionated about it. So that's a good starting point, really.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think I don't think we ever truly reach. I mean, okay, maybe not ever. That's a bit drastic, but I think it is a lifetime pursuit, and if not a multiple lifetime pursuit of attaining enlightenment. But I think it can also happen in an instant.
Yeah.
Or even tiny glimpses, kind of like what we were talking about earlier with those euphoric moments where they're so absolutely serendipitous and just everything is perfect, walking on a cloud, right? This, if that was our natural state, if everything that came out of our mouths was naturally good, can you imagine what the world would be like if everyone's existence was that? And yet, at least coming from a Christian perspective, we know that the Bible has said that the power of life and death resides in the tongue, and that it is sharper than any two-edged sword, and that it will destroy someone or it can build someone up. At what point do we determine whether that aspect of ourselves is good or bad? Or should we just talk less? Sorry, that one just came, just bonked me in the head. Maybe we should talk less. Because at that point, then it's almost requiring an opinion to hold discussion on it.
Is this where the whole actions speak louder than words and silence is a response?
Yeah, well,
Sometimes it's stronger.
Hold on a second. No, maybe that was it. Conduct the teaching of no words. I think that's exactly what that means. And correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody else knows more about this. But I think that sentence right there sums up exactly what you just said, Jess. Conduct the teaching of no words. So the sages knew that they needed to conduct the teaching of no words. Well, how do you do that?
By showing.
Exactly. Showing. Lead by example. Absolutely. Walk the walk. Doesn't matter how much you talk the talk.
And again, very similar in the Bible, a tree is known by its fruits.
And if you go back, it says if you take your feelings out, you get to the underlying cause of what's going on. Or what was it? Back up one page. What is it? Yeah, no. The same page, but yeah, there you go. The underlying reality. And then when you see the underlying reality, you jump into action. Like yesterday, my dog bit our neighbor's dog. So you should have seen this girl being Ray Lewis and tackling my dog to get him off the other dog. It was not good. The 75-year-old man. Yeah, it was very traumatic. Right. I mean, you just jump into action. You don't think. Who has time to think? There's a burning building going on, you know? Do you think they think? And that's how the mystery, that's how it just keeps on going on, because you're always going to have people that are good people and they jump into action.
Yeah, I agree. There are a lot of looky-loos, lots of looky-loos.
Are you saying loopy-loos?
Looky-loos, like people who will stand
Oh, back in
on the
golf?
edges of a tragedy and just
Oh,
or
they
take
pull out their
video.
cell phone.
Well,
Yeah.
just like the broken leg
Ah,
or the crucifixion of Jesus. Those
But
are the
see,
ones that are going to gawk.
but I think those are also the ones that are focused on everyone else's opinion instead of being in them. You know, it's that self-serving behavior. Like trying, if you're too busy trying to fit in and be liked by others, you're not focusing on the right thing to do. You
But then
know,
they have no identity. They're a shell. I mean,
Yeah.
how sad is that?
yeah.
And one of the things though that people say time and time again in different like psychological evaluations, things like that, is that human beings above all else do not require food, water, love as much as they require acceptance. Because acceptance ancestrally was required for survival. You could not survive without the acceptance of your tribe. If they ostracized you from the tribe, you were up the creek without a paddle. Or maybe they sent you up the creek without
Exiled. Yeah, you were exiled. Yeah. Or
and
killed.
then it was you against the world. It was you out in the wilderness trying to struggle to survive. In a way, I mean, it weeds out the weaklings. And I feel like that's a shadow aspect of me coming through to say something like that, right? Is that the darkness talking? Because I feel like I get that.
I think it is just, I really do, because what is weak in their eyes, it might be weak, but they could have had the strongest mind. They could have had a gift that nobody else had.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
who is to say that I get I do take it personally. This is where I go wrong, right? When emotions come in and you take things
Trying to stay
personally,
objective.
that's when, right. So Egyptians, if a baby was born deformed, I think they throw it off a cliff or something like that. But who's to say that baby wasn't going to take them to the next level, you know? If
No, but
they would have just,
you do have to understand like where they were coming from in their time frame. They were coming from a place of survival. They didn't have the technology and the medical things, advancements that we have to be able to even sustain life. So some of their children wouldn't have survived either because of their deformity or because of the people that those people served or whatever, whether they were royalty or not, but other people often, even in some countries still today, there are children who have disabilities. They were born with birth defects or whatever, and they are ostracized, thrown out of their village because one, they take up resources, and two, the villagers believe that those people are afflicted by a demon, and that's why they don't want them to try.
yeah,
How do you feel about that?
it hurts my heart. It does.
Mhm.
You know,
Um,
But
yeah,
is that from a 21st century first world country perspective?
yeah.
no,
Okay.
but there are, stories in the Bible as well about having, you know, a thorn in his side, and um, Jesus removing the demon and straightening his back, like there was a demon attached to him. But I don't know. It just it
You're right.
hurts my heart.
I think you're right. I think that even so, even if there is a demon attached to that child, why wouldn't you try to exorcise the demon and help them?
Yeah,
I get where you're coming from, but at the same time, okay. So let's look at it from this perspective. Oh my goodness, there's so much crime, there's so much devastation, there's so much depravity in the world. Oh, the billionaires want to kill everyone off. What if they think they're doing what is morally right? And what do you think about it? Is it morally right, or is it morally wrong?
I
Is
think that if they were in a different position, that they wouldn't feel that way. I think it's just, again, with what they think is good is not good to someone else.
But to be perfectly honest with you, and I do have to be real raw in this moment, I don't necessarily disagree. And again, I'm sure that's, the dark side. But um, it's kind of like the hypothetical, would you go back and kill Hitler as a baby? And hopefully this video doesn't get flagged for me saying that, but that's kind of that philosophical question. If you knew someone was going to grow up to be horrible, would you have the heart to go back and execute them as an infant, or would you have to, or attempt to try to change them, and would it even work? There's kind of like this moral gray area. I think that there are a lot of good people in the world, and I also think that there are a lot of depraved people, and I also think that there are a lot of people who are just selfish, inconsiderate, um, heartless people. And I guess I don't really feel I don't feel remorse for the idea that they had the potential to not be on this earth anymore. Oh, dark. I'm okay with that. I'll own it. But I can't I can't not acknowledge that aspect of myself in this moment. It makes sense.
It does. And I mean, this is not, anywhere close to Hitler, but like I watch NCIS all the time, and you see the bad guy, the villain of the suspect, doing awful things, and then that suspect gets killed by somebody trying to save someone else's life. It's the I feel like it's just divinely timed. I think that's the shadow side. The I don't know how to explain it. It's the whole thing about like, why does God let bad things happen in the world? Well, maybe without that bad thing, that darkness, there wouldn't be this light and this blessing.
I agree. Well, I mean, okay, let's take a recent event. Let's take Maui, right? That was a devastating thing. That's horrible for those people. But
Hmm.
at the same time, what miraculous outpouring of love we have seen within that community and from people all over the world for the people of that community. So it's almost like when darkness comes, goodness shines brighter.
I agree. Yeah.
Sometimes we don't want those things to happen, but at the same time, I'll never forget when my sister was little. I think my sister was like 11, and this girl that she looked up to that went to her church youth group was 16, and she was headed, I think she was headed back from the prom or something, and the car, I think the driver was drinking, or I forget, but somehow the car went off the road and this girl passed away. And sweet girl, just brilliant student, brilliant volleyball star, just wonderful kid. Everybody loved her. They had her funeral, and there were so many people there that they were outside of the church. They couldn't hold the people in the church anymore. There was just so many people there. And they learned a valuable lesson. Most of them were very, very young. They learned that they shouldn't be drinking and driving. And as sad as it was for that family to lose their daughter, it made a whole lot of people, a whole lot of young people, really think twice about their decisions going forward, because they would forever have that one friend that died in a car accident as a result of, so it's a terrible tragedy. All of these things are terrible tragedies, and while we can mourn with the people that are negatively impacted by the tragedies, I think we also have to celebrate with the people that are seeing those glimmers of hope in the midst of those tragedies. When as a single parent, I was no income because of my car accident, and then someone would just leave baskets of food on the steps. I mean, I don't know why, I don't know how, I don't know who, but I was thankful for it, right? Everything that was bad, that appeared bad, that my perception determined was bad, actually ended up with some really great stuff coming out of it. I really learned a lot about faith in those years.
It's so funny. While you're sitting here talking, I'm rereading section 2, and it all goes together. I mean, I'm reading it backwards and it's flowing. Like music and voice harmonize each other. High and low support each other. So like during these tragedies, the low of the tragedy, but the high of the people's coming with their love and support, and then it talks about difficult and easy bring about each other. Well, those difficult moments is what brings about the good moments, and then thus being and non-being produce each other. Those good moments wouldn't exist without those bad moments. So it was just weird as you're talking, I'm rereading this, but backwards, and it's just flowing, you know?
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
All right, let's see. I think I have a couple notes on this one. Yeah, just a few. Tao sages have long recognized the relative nature of the world. I say this all the time. Everything is relative. Values have meaning only in comparison. So when one thing is in relation to another. For instance, a task can only be easy if we compare it to some other task that is more difficult. If there is nothing else to compare it with, the task cannot be rated in terms of difficulty. That makes sense to me. That was one of those things that just clicked. It was like, oh, okay, yep, that makes sense. Similarly, we can only say an object is long if we are comparing it to another similar object that is shorter. Each half of a duality cannot exist without the other. A descriptive concept creates its own opposite. This relative concept applies to everything, even good and evil. What about absolute good and evil? Do they exist in the Tao? While we can certainly find absolutes in abstract theory, in the real world, they rarely, if ever, exist. And this is where what I meant earlier by objective versus subjective, right? For instance, no metal is absolutely free of impurities. In fact, hardly anything in nature is absolutely pure. We can get close to 100% purity, but never quite reach that absolute state. It is the same with people. Absolute good and evil can exist as concepts, but we will never find them in human beings. We are all mixtures of varying proportions. None of us is any one thing. So I'm going to go back really quickly. The part where it talks about each half of a duality kind of exists without the other. Again, looking at it from my mental image of a thermometer, right? There's a low temperature and there's a high temperature. These two are the dual natures of one another. But then there's also these two and these two and these two and these two and these two. And eventually they come back together and they're exactly one. Right? So there's macro, I'm sorry, there's, micro in the macro. There's the microcosm within the macrocosm. There's those different dualities along the way. And then there's also that ultimate unification point, which is always in the middle. Always in the middle, right? What do we talk about all the time with the middle path? How do you guys feel about that? The middle path.
I think when I was going back to setting, where we set the bar for good action, you know, and our perceived belief of good action and kindness is the middle path.
Yeah.
I think the middle path is totally balanced.
It feels good to me. Just the idea of total balance feels good to me.
They used to say in the groove,
Yeah. We're in the flow, right?
in the flow. Yeah.
All right. Verse 3. Do not glorify the achievers, so the people will not squabble. Do not treasure goods that are hard to obtain, so the people will not become thieves. Do not show the desired things, so their hearts will not be confused. Thus, the governance of the sage empties their hearts, fills their bellies, weakens their ambitions, strengthens their bones. Let the people have no cunning and no greed, so those who scheme will not dare to meddle. Act without contrivance, and nothing will be beyond control. So, yeah, Katie, I am my sun sign to a T, aren't I? I love the balance. Do not glorify achievers. You know, I feel like this whole section is kind of putting the onus back on the, let's just say the elites or the wealthy people or whatever distinction you want to have, the people that are at the top of the spectrum, right? I feel like it's putting it back on them. Oh, well, if we don't want people to become thieves, then we shouldn't treasure fancy things. So it's kind of like you know, blaming the victims, so to speak. These people might have thieves come in and steal their things, but well, they shouldn't have wanted those things that were hard to obtain and easy for people to steal in the first place. So how do you feel about putting the onus back on the achievers or the ones who are greedy and cunning? You know, do you think that brings them back within the providence of the Tao?
I find it interesting that they said, do not glorify the achievers. It doesn't say don't be an achiever, you know, when we're looking at being humble, you know, achievers that are humble.
Okay.
It says, do not glorify the achievers, meaning all the other people. So the people will not squabble, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's actually the little guy that's glorifying the one who has been successful.
Exactly.
But But is it not the one who is successful that has likely treasured the goods? Then again, it could be the one that's doing the glorifying too, that's treasuring the goods, right? Maybe they don't have as fancy of a security system because they weren't an achiever. I think it's interesting that cunning and greed are specifically pointed out. I think this goes back to greed and pride being a big problem. Go ahead.
I just got something when I was sitting here. So I'm reading my version, which is apparently a New English version. It's a little different than yours. It says, if you overesteem great men, people become powerless. If you overvalue possessions, people begin to steal. And the more I read it, the more I feel like it's an internal thing where if you are looking at somebody and putting them up on a pedestal in your mind, per se, you're giving your power away, your energy. And then if you overvalue possessions, you begin to steal. So it's like giving your energy away to something bigger than yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's more of an internal thing that it has nothing to do with the rich man or the possessions, but everything that you think of yourself.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? What do you guys think of that?
I guess it'd be another way of interpreting that first sentence, do not glorify achievers. I can see a danger in by glorifying achievement. You could change the drive of somebody to achieve to be the desire of glory, which of course is then dangerous and then starts to more focus on the self again, doesn't it? And selfish action. I want to be famous. I want the glory. This is why I'm doing something.
Envy,
And
yeah.
then achievement is becoming superficial, or I mean, there's motivation behind achievement, isn't there? And I guess you could redirect that motivation to be something not so good.
So either it's not about the achievement, but the journey that it takes to get there, or the achievement should be to the benefit of others. At least that's my take on it.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? Anybody want to add?
I'm still stuck on maybe I'm stuck in one frame of mind here, but as soon as you bring up glorify the achiever, you've already identified who's the achiever, and that means that you're not it. Like, that feels like a problem to me, because by breathing and by being, I'm achieving.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Someone is better, or the grass is always greener, keeping up with the Benjamins, or keeping up with the
Right.
Kardashians, right?
I like that perspective, because just look at, like, I don't know, NFL football players or Hollywood, we glorify these people.
Yes.
And it makes us so insignificant. And then you can even go further, with body image and all that other kind of stuff that comes into it.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right on, Jessica.
They squabble. Right?
Yeah.
Jess, you need to be here.
I'm right here.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Act without contrivance and nothing will be beyond control. I like that. I'm not a big fan of things that are contrived. If you have to work hard to make it be, if you have to fake it to be nice to someone, it's not really that worth it. You could just be kind or not, but don't fake it. The contrivances. Not one of those traits I'm a big fan of. Okay, so our first note for verse 3 was when we glorify achievers and set them aside for special treatment, people will compete aggressively and step over one another to achieve that glory. Similarly, when we place a high value on certain goods, there will be those who plot to take them by force or by trickery. This determination of value can be rather arbitrary. For instance, what intrinsic goodness does gold have that makes it so much more valuable than other metals? What is so great about gold other than a particular numerical value that people determine and agree upon? In general, whenever we point to anything as desirable, a wave of disruption ripples through society. People begin to think of ways to get more of the desirable thing, often at the expense of others. Because of this, a sagacious ruler refrains from setting aside certain individuals for glorification or designated certain goods as extremely valuable and putting them on display. These are surefire ways of stimulating materialistic desire, which is a bottomless pit. This is really interesting because this goes back to something that you have been discussing quite a bit, John, is social engineering. You know, a savvy king knows, okay, well, let's have these certain people be glorified and let's have these certain goods be hard to get so that we can continue to have these people always focused on this materialistic desire that doesn't allow them to become achievers, maybe. Right?
So I had this exact feeling earlier in this study, way, like very beginning. Um, Goodness, how do I explain this? How we're not able to focus, and focus is actually the opposite of what we want to do. We're not able to live and like get to the Tao because we're so distracted with all this technology and look here, watch the left hand, not the right hand. Okay. It's this constant chaos
Yeah.
of noise that we're not able to even get there, which is a lie because I've been there every now and then, but it's in the silence, you know?
Disruption. Oh,
So, yes, what y'all are saying is true. Social engineering. That's what's happening right now on the internet as we speak. This video, actually.
you drive down the road and it happens. You listen to the
Mhm.
radio and it happens. You turn the TV on and it happens. You walk into a store and it happens. You see a bus drive by and it happens. It's just constant barrage of social engineering, right? Buy this, don't buy that. Go see this person, don't see that person. It's incessant. It's annoying. Um, hold on, give me a second. Reset different that annoying. Okay, second note here. Although the sages empty people's hearts of desires and reduce their ambitions for fame, glory, or material wealth, they also pay particular attention to their basic needs. As rulers, the sages see to it that the people enjoy good health and do not go hungry. As teachers, the sages give people teachings that provide spiritual sustenance and promote spiritual health. I absolutely adore this. This just feels like what we're all supposed to be doing. Um, it makes sense to take care of people, the most basic human necessities. And I'm not saying that from a perspective of, oh, let's enact socialism. But people tend to be happier when their basic needs are met. They're less likely to revolt. And it seems almost, at least here in this country, that our politicians have kind of forgotten that. I don't know about in your country, John, but over here, it seems like they've forgotten that if you keep the people happy, they won't revolt. But I think I can probably speak for everyone on the panel tonight. I'm not happy. I'm not. But am I supposed to just be okay with the condition of things? Am I supposed to just sit in Zen? Or am I supposed to go out and wow? What do you do there?
The greater vessel should prevail, help people, and
I'm still working on that lesser vessel.
I
Gotta
think you're
get
meant
myself right first. What's that?
I think you're meant to do exactly what you're doing. Whatever spirit calls you to do is how you're meant to help.
I do agree with that. I feel if we're tapped into that current, it's very easy to just flow where you need to flow to. Be in the perfect place at the perfect time to provide the perfect service. I believe that.
Yeah, I think Katie said it earlier in the chat about divine timing. It's going to be what it's going to be. And I don't say that as in I'm not going to act and do anything. I'm just going to let it happen, but I'm just going to listen and and do what I'm called to do, whatever that may be. I don't know. I'm getting sleepy.
Well, we're getting into verse 4 here. So take a deep breath. We're almost to the end. So the third note here is when people follow the way of the sages, the few who scheme and plot will find themselves unable to utilize their repertoire of clever ploys. The governance of the sages leaves no room for their contrived tactics, and everything falls into place peacefully and naturally. Boy, howdy, wouldn't it be nice to live in that society? How do we become those who govern as sages? And are we even worthy to do that? Are we sages? Are we still just babes on our journey? At what level do you say, oh, I'm a sage now, so I can govern you? Because technically, you're not even supposed to consider yourself that way. You know, if you think you've reached it, you haven't reached it. You know what I mean? You who scheme and plot will find themselves unable to utilize their repertoire of clever plans. Follow the way of the sages. On that note, let's find out more of what the sages say. The Tao is empty. When utilized, it is not filled up. So deep, it seems to be the source of all things. It blunts the sharpness, unravels the knots, dims the glare, mixes the dust. So indistinct, it seems to exist. I do not know whose offspring it is. Its image is the predecessor of the emperor. So this was actually a specific emperor. Does it talk about that? I don't think it is. But this actually was referring to the Jade Emperor. Well, no, it might be in the fifth note. I won't say anymore. So, first note. The emptiness of the Tao is not a vacuous state of nothingness because its infinite depths conceal the seeds of creation. There appears to be nothing in the Tao, and yet it contains everything. It is the pregnant void, a field of unlimited potentiality. So this is what I meant earlier. The nothing is just unlimited potential. Right? One way to describe the Tao is to compare it with an empty container with infinite capacity. This container cannot be filled up, and the water that flows out of it can never be used up. It continues to function indefinitely.
I feel like we're just talking about space, like nothingness that just keeps growing.
Well,
You know, like space.
I've talked about this with Caleb before with regards to energy not being able to be created or destroyed. If the universe is ever expanding, what's happening to the energy? Is it just growing, or is it reproduce? Like, how do you understand where I'm going with that?
I do. I feel like that. I feel like you're going towards awakening, like how people, the energy, it's there's definitely more energy. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Perhaps perhaps it, instead of densifying into matter, just goes higher and higher on the spectrum. Okay. We're gonna stop that train of thought. You guys have any perspective on that? Because I could go kind of deep with that.
I think in terms of what you just said about energy and expansion of the, I'm not sure. I think, I mean, I guess some things that we're at least aware of in the universe. I mean, they might not necessarily need to be understood. It might not be necessary for us to get close to the truth. And with regards to this kind of Taoist belief of there being like there's no beginning and no end, you see, because that's another dualistic thought. There was a beginning to the universe, there's an end to the universe, and then obviously that's not necessarily the case. You know, maybe the universe has been never ending. So, and part of the mechanism of this never ending universe is this quantity of energy which is required for the universe to be as it is. I mean, everything that happens right, you know, and we've got this incredible ability to perceive everything around us and ponder on it and wonder on it. And I just wonder sometimes if we spend too much time trying to work out something which isn't probably necessary for getting to where we want to go. You see, you can put so much information in it. So like a detective trying to work out a knife case. So much of his information he has is valuable. And then a lot of things he's been looking at don't get into where he's trying to navigate towards. And maybe that's the case. Maybe some things in the universe have been designed to just be the way they are, and they don't require any more necessary consideration. You know, they are just as they are.
Kind of like air, right? It just is.
Yeah.
You can't do much about it. So I get like this vision of the toroidal field. You know, it's kind of like, oh, it's ever expanding, but it's always cycling back through. Oh, it's ever expanding and cycling back through. You know, it's almost like it's getting bigger, bigger, smaller. I don't know. It's yeah. I think that they're quite deep on that.
I think with human beings, there's definitely a kind of I can remember speaking to a doctor once when I was having some problems. I think I was getting quite anxious and I was manifesting symptoms which may have been psychosomatic. And the doctor at the time said, look, in the West, you spend so much time expelling energy to make yourself feel better, whereas in the East, we practice accumulated energy as much as we do expending. A lot of times when we're negative or we're aggressive or hostile or whatnot, you lose your temper. You have such a you generate and expel so much energy so quickly. It's almost wasted energy, isn't it? And you know, so I think there's a natural kind of lean towards the correct use of energy, the balance, the correct I won't say exhaust, but the correct energy burn in action and stuff. I think that's probably quite tied into what we talked about earlier with good, you know, and the pose at the bar for good and right action and that sort of thing. I think they're kind of related in that. I had a an idea recently that somebody said life, they think life might be getting closer to almost, they almost proposed that energy had this motivation to keep traveling, and life, organic life, so far as one of the best vessels for it to vibrate and carry on. So we're kind of at this, life is kind of like this, almost this peak point for energy to travel through and vibrate through. So
That's very interesting.
yeah, it was fascinating.
So that brings me back to that idea, and I think you were in that study of how the churches and the monasteries and stuff were built to represent the physical body and the chakra system and be able to harness energy. I wonder if it's because they knew that the human was such an effective vessel, or just organic life in general. But I mean, it tended to be modeled after a man, right? So I wonder if they already knew that. I mean, humanity in itself has such a tremendous generative property, not just in a procreative context, but even just creating things, ideas, items, I mean, if you think about it, probably more often than not, you're actually creating something, right? Whether you're writing something down, you're making a meal, by nature, we are generative. So that is sort of this expenditure of energy, but it always ends up coming back around, right? So it just continues to keep that energy flowing. Very interesting thought.
I suppose you could look at, and say, well, when you look at things like stars, and the phenomenal amounts of energy that they produce, and then human beings are like a tiny blip in the universe, and in contrast to that. However, we are on the cusp of colonizing other planets in our solar system. There's already been consideration for vessels to travel to Mars, and I know that's been held back a bit, but it's probably going to happen. It's probably going to happen within our lifetime that we send human beings over there. In the next 100, 200 years, we may all of a sudden become very big players in the transfer of energy in the universe. We just don't know what's around the corner. We can harness the sun, can't we? So through solar power.
I mean, plants harness the power of the sun.
Right, and when we grow plants, we're growing plants as well.
Even when we sit outside in the sun for 20 minutes, we're harnessing the power of the sun because we're just like a plant, right? Or vitamin D. Any thoughts, any questions, additional perspective on that bit? Pretty sure I just read all of that, correct? Correct me if I didn't read all of that. The indistinct nature of the Tao refers to the fact that we cannot perceive it directly. We can only observe its effects on the world, just as we can see the effects of gravity or objects falling, but never gravity itself. So again, that's like air. We know we require air to breathe. We know that the air is moving through the trees, but we can't see it. So we can observe its effects on the world, but we cannot perceive air directly. Same with the Tao. We do not know how the Tao came to be or whether it came from anywhere at all. Does the concept of place have meaning without the Tao? Does the ultimate source have a source? We cannot say. We cannot pretend to have all the answers. Sometimes we just have to be okay with not knowing. Right? And then this last bit here, the emperor in this line refers to Yu Di, and I'm probably butchering that, so my apologies, but that was the Jade Emperor. He is the ruler of the universe and supreme deity in ancient Chinese mythology. Lao Tzu is saying that the image of the Tao precedes even such a being. because any principles that govern the divine must, by definition, be part of the Tao. Therefore, the Tao has to be already present before anything like the supreme deity can manifest existence. So even within the deities, the Tao existed because without the Tao, they couldn't have. Any thoughts, questions, final takeaways for those four verses of the Tao of Ching? I was saying that wrong too. Some people say Jing. Everybody got quiet. I think they're ready to watch your video.
Sorry, I was purposely being quiet.
Oh, you're good. Giving everybody a turn. I know.
I was trying to, yeah, control myself because I get really talkative and I go in deep with things.
That's okay.
And like I could even take this in this last part super deep. Everything that you guys were talking about, I could go super deep with, even as far as, yes, we will have humans on other planets, and how will that affect the entire system? We don't know. You know, I feel like only the Tao knows within the Tao. It's not that, you know,
That's
it
the Tao
existed
ever.
it existed before God, before Jesus, before deities, before everything. Like that, I'm gonna have to ponder for a while because I'm pre-programmed, you know, with the whole Bible and growing up Catholic of creation. Like I know it's true though. I know the Tao existed long before everything. It had to.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was going to say as well. I mean, one of the criticisms when I was starting to embrace Christianity was you'd get asked questions like, well, you know, if there is a God, then you know, who created God? And I mean, usually the answer is, well, God was there from the very beginning, you know. So then when you look at something like this and it's suggesting that this Tao is even more eternal than God.
Mm-hmm.
My concept of God, even a Christian God, was that it was both like a both like a supreme deity, but also like the Tao. You know, that I can see God like that anyway.
Okay.
And I don't mean I don't mean to suggest that all of a sudden like my kind of Christian belief is a God that's like pantheism, you know, like God is everything. It's more I just had this kind of notion that, you know, yeah, God is really part of this Tao, if you like. He's the kind of, you know, existence manifest, if you like. Because I mean, this is ultimately what the Tao, I guess, is trying to do. I mean, the important takeaway from this as well is that right from the onset, it was that the Tao cannot be described.
Mm-hmm.
And it cannot be named. And then we spent the last couple of hours looking at people trying to describe it and name it. So,
Right. Isn't that ironic?
By human nature.
That's the enigma of it all, isn't it? But it is to some degree understandable. I think, you know, I think probably all of us maybe have a better comprehension of this kind of thing. You know, some nothing is required for something, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's kind of infinite as well, because I can remember well, just quickly, people talking about dualistic and, you know, things beginning and end, and nothing including ourselves. Where do we end? Do we say we end, or do we say our beginning was at conception, or was it at the beginning of our parents' conception or our grandparents' conception? You see, so at what point at what point did we actually come into being? Because the notion is that it's like, well, when we were born, you know, and then when we started to think that's not really the case, is it? You know, so
I think therefore I am.
yeah,
right?
quite. But
Thoughts?
does anything have a beginning or end? You know, I think if you said to most people as well, and I pondered this for a while, if you said to somebody, look, here's the deal, right? You die, and then you come back reincarnated, but you have no memory of your previous life, or you die, and that's it. Most people would choose the first option, but they're both, I mean, technically the same thing, aren't they? But I would still wish it as well if the option was to come back but then have no memory of your previous life. Yeah, I would probably say the same thing. I'll have that one, please.
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
No,
You
I'd choose the other.
you to be eternally ended. But they're not the same thing.
Probably. I guess it depends on how you come back in the next life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, I guess so. Yeah.
I think that the Tao, at least in my understanding of it, you know, as we were trying to quantify it and give it characteristics that we can kind of comprehend, the aspect of it that is incomprehensible is the majesty of it. It's that which is awe-inspiring to me. So I personally, I have a long way to go with this because I very much am of that mindset about, you know, two opposites being balanced. But I don't necessarily think that the Tao is solely that. It's everything in between and outside of that and down the street from that. It's so much more, and that to me is breathtaking. It's awe inspiring. I can look at it and not logic and reason past the awe of it. And that's where that stops for me because I'm just mind blown that this to me could be, you know, what people would consider God. I think a lot of people have a viewpoint that you had shared with us about, you know, God being this kind of deity, but at the same time being the Tao, being everything. And, you know, knowing what we've studied with Gnosticism and how they view that kind of this monad or this overarching being that then created everything out, you know, trickle down kind of effect. But it actually fit really nicely with these Eastern belief systems. So I'm anxious to continue on through this text in the coming weeks, probably months, because you guys know how slowly I move on these texts, 4 verses at a time.
Well, I'm almost thinking that what we went through tonight was almost maybe a little bit more than what we should have. I mean, I don't want to use should, but I think we could take this slower because it's just so deep.
Yes.
You know, like this is a lot to take in just these 4 books. I'm not complaining. I can, you know, I'm loving it, and I find it extremely ironic that we started out this conversation with what we believed the Tao was, and that awe word was in there, and how it's ending with that in awe again. It's yeah, that to me is pretty significant because I feel like even though I don't have the words to explain it, I have a sense of what it is. And it, like when I think of God, it's not even in a religious or deity kind of way. I always get the 2 words light and love in my head. And those 2 words by themselves are just, there's so much to them. And we talked about so much of it, you know, about with light and the different frequencies and all that kind of stuff. And how John was saying love is what amplifies energy, or however he said it. You know, it's so much within just those 2 words that I just can't seem to put together to explain correctly, but I feel it. So that's what I'm taking away from the study tonight.
Good. Stay tapped in. Stay tuned in, turned on to that awareness. I feel like that is one of those things that, you know, in my primarily Christian understanding is best reflected in the peace that surpasses all understanding.
Hmm.
No matter what chaos may be ensuing around you, if you can maintain that peace, I feel like that is learning to live with the Tao.
Yeah, live and let live.
Yeah, well, I mean, I envision a little blade of seaweed in the ocean, just back and forth. Tide comes in, tide goes out, you know. Just keep living in that flow.
Absolutely.